a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Tuesday, the 19th of May, year of our Lord 2026. Well, today is the day, the Kentucky primary. This is about much more than just Trump versus a congressman who has opposed him on key issues. And on every one of these issues that he has opposed Trump, he has been with the Constitution, with the rule of law, with morality. And yet, we see that the massive amount of money, they have jacked this up, this record amount they're spending to stop Thomas Massie, and I'm talking about they, the Zionists. It's jumped up by 50% in just the last week. This is a referendum on whether we will have an American government or a Zionist-occupied government. That's reality. This is elections at their worst, folks. Outside money, outside not just of the state, outside of the country, outside of the Constitution, outside of morality. And then we'll also see Elon Musk going full Antichrist. I don't even know if he realizes it or not. And as Trump is pushing another grand deception, the UF hoax. We'll be right back. Let's talk about what's going on with the Massie race. His chances of winning the primary plunged suddenly yesterday on the eve of Election Day. Now, again, when you they had spent over $10 million, the Zionist billionaires, and then all of a sudden last week, they came up with a couple of lies and put those things out. As Thomas Massie said, if you look at the demographics of people who are supporting Massie, it goes anywhere. If you look at the people 55 and under, his support is plus 17 to plus 56 points, depending on the age bracket. If you look at those over 55, it goes from about plus 17 to about plus 35, if I remember correctly. We'll get to that in a moment. Why is that? Is it because the people over 55 don't really understand AI? Is it because they don't understand politics? Because they don't understand life? Yeah, this is, I think, what is really happening. I got to say, I think we need to understand what MAGA really stands for. It really stands for a multitude of asinine, gullible Americans. We're going to find out today if that is a majority of asinine, gullible Americans. So Massie's chances took a sudden dip. They did initially with the lies about this staffer that are out there. And as I pointed out yesterday, Reason had a good article, and we covered that yesterday. The self-contradictory and improbable story of this woman made absolutely no sense, and she contradicted herself all the way through it. And we'll talk about that as well. But again, he took a deep plunge, and when the people took a look at it, he came back up. But then you got War Pete. If ever there was a poster child for war and Zionism, that's War Pete. And of course, he flies and parachutes in, I guess, to support this trained SEAL. And I'm talking about not a Navy SEAL. I'm talking about the mammal kind. He is a performing SEAL. And he's only got one trick, and that is he wants war, more of it, and he wants it for Israel. So he's exactly like War Pete. The two of them are both trained SEALs. So when we look at other trained SEALs, we've got Dan Bongino crawling out of the woodwork like a cockroach. This is a guy who, if anybody, you look at Thomas Massie, and whatever happens to him, he has had integrity and credibility. He stood with the Constitution. He stood with morality. Bongino has none of those things. This is a guy who built his reputation on criticizing Epstein and what was happening with that stuff, and then became one of the key figures in the cover-up.
It's a difficult conversation for me because
Yeah, it is, because you're such a hypocrite.
I did. I supported him.
Yeah.
For a while. Even
Epstein?
when, him and
Trump?
President Trump butted heads. been good on some issues. But I'm going to tell you something. I have never been as disappointed in a human being in politics as I am in Tom Massie.
Well, that's the way we feel about you, Dan Bongino. I've never been more disappointed. Well, I actually have with Donald Trump. As Thomas Massie has said, well, you want to say that I've opposed Trump on certain issues? He said, well, 91% of the time I vote with the Republicans.
So, Congressman, in the last 2 weeks, you repeated AOC's talking points on Venezuela, and Jasmine Crockett has retweeted you. When will you change your party affiliation to Democrat?
This guy's voice is changing.
I thought you did. I vote with Republicans 91% of the time.
And
the 9% I don't, they're taking up for pedophiles, starting another war, or bankrupting our country.
That's right. Well, we have, as a matter of fact, he took a question and he responded. That's something Ed Galerine can't do. As a matter of fact, I didn't put the video in the deck because it's all just visual. Nothing is being said. You got Ed Galerine at a public event, and there's a guy there who is very well known as a retired military guy. I forget what his rank was. I got kind of caught up on the fact that he was a Kentucky colonel. And I thought, well, what is that? It's a honorary title in Kentucky for somebody who has, it's a civilian title. It's not military at all. But it's done by the governor. So this is a known guy. And he quietly was walking up to ask Ed Galerine some questions. And there's three guys who stand in front of him. I mean, they're screening him like it's a basketball game. They stand in front of this guy who wanted to ask Ed some questions with their hands folded. And then as Ed moves off to the side, they move off to the side and stand there with their, backs to this guy and their hands folded in front of them. It's pretty amazing.
I have the video if you want me to play.
Oh, you do? Yeah, let's go ahead and play it. I'll just kind of narrate it here. It's not, it is not something that you can actually hear anything. Look at this, the way these guys get in front of him. Nope, you're not going to get close to him. And they've actually got three guys that do this. Look at this, how they're shoulder to shoulder. Now they're walking. That guy in the gray is the one who wanted to ask him a question. They keep doing this. What is he afraid of? The bottom line is that this trained performing SEAL doesn't have anything to say about anything. That's why they like him. That's what they do when they bring in outside money. We had here in Tennessee, we had Frank Nicely, a great senator here in Tennessee. Did so much to help people. He got ivermectin over the counter. He did many things to try to help the government to set aside gold for the coming collapse of the currency. And he tried to stop outside money from coming into the state to support people. Well, he lost on that one. And so the outside money came after him. They did the same stuff to him that they're doing to Thomas Massie. And of course, I've seen this before in the past. But I guess it opened up some fresh wounds after seeing what they did to Frank Nicely. And they put in a guy, his name was actually SEAL, Jesse SEALs. And so you have these trained SEALs that are picked up by the big money people. And, Frank Nicely was somebody who was rated in the high 90s by the John Birch Society in terms of freedom score and conservatism, standing for the Constitution, individual liberty, fiscal responsibility. And this guy is down in the low 60s. It's typical what you see these people doing. And I expect the same thing from the other trained SEAL, Ed Galerine. No debate, no policy except war. War all the time, war everywhere, war for whatever Israel wants. So when you look at the articles, just like I talked about yesterday, the Independent, the UK Independent, they talk about all these differences over policy that Trump and Massie have had. And again, Ed Galerine says, well, yeah, he's like Ronald Reagan. No, he's exactly the opposite of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan could tolerate dissent in the ranks without turning on his own people, not Donald Trump, not the narcissist in chief. And so when Newsweek starts to talk about the differences, the feud with Trump, they talk about everything except Zionism, which is the elephant in the room. Same thing that the so-called Independent out of the UK did. It tells you everything you need to know about these news outlets. When I talk about Newsweek, I've always said the way you spell weak is W-E-A-K. It's not W-E-E-K. Massie endorsed Trump in the 2024 presidential election, they said. Again, he got on Trump's wrong side back in 2020 when he voted against the $2 trillion COVID relief package. Now, let's understand, if you look at the rate that we're accumulating massive debt, Trump put us on an entirely new slope with that move. Biden maintained that. And so has Trump in this term, although he's starting to accelerate the slope again. Massie stood against that, and one of the things that he was accused of grandstanding because he told the Congress, he said, you're not going to vote by mail to do this. You're going to come in person to vote for this. And his intention, I think, was to show that the COVID pandemic nonsense was really hyped up fraud. And of course, this was fraudulent as well. The COVID relief package, we see most of that money going to fraud and to billionaires, even the stuff that was supposedly earmarked for small businesses. So Trump called for him to be thrown out of the GOP at that point in time. Again, this is always what you see the people say, well, he's grandstanding. And I find that the most incredible projection from all of these Trump supporters. How could they accuse anyone of grandstanding if they were to look at Trump himself, the grandfather of grandstanding? So again, Massie was right to oppose the fraud of COVID and the debt, and he's been right in all of these disagreements with Trump. He opposed the president's foreign policy decisions as well. He supported a war powers resolution. That's called the Constitution, folks, that would curb Trump's ability to declare war on Iran. That's not in the Constitution. He also has broken with the president on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Let's understand, it's not a big, beautiful act. It is a big, ugly debt that he put in there. And he said there's a lack of spending cuts in here. And so Trump accused him of being against tax cuts. Yeah, we're going to cut taxes, but we're going to raise spending. From the guy who bankrupted 6 casinos. That's what he is talking about here. He criticized the administration's handling of Epstein documents, says Newsweek. No, it was not the handling, it was the cover-up. And of course, that's one of the big reasons why Bongino is so angry. He had to run out of Washington because he knew he was going to be facing all kinds of hearings, impeachment, not impeachment, but perjury traps that were going to be there. He's either going to have to lie for Trump or he's going to have to grandstand and not show up. That's why he's angry. Trump said, well, this guy's an automatic no. No matter what, he says, if we did welfare reform, if we did the greatest thing in history for religion, what is Trump going to do the greatest thing in history for religion? You know, Jesus was critical of religion. It's not about religion. It's about relationship. Trump just can't get past the point of constantly comparing himself to Jesus. We see it every day, and you see his followers doing it every day, just like Eric Metaxas. And then when they're called out on, oh, it was satire, it was a joke. Yeah, it's a joke like him wanting to be king. That's not a joke. We had here, as we're talking about the 250th anniversary of people fighting against King George III for their freedom. Now we have to fight against King Trump III for our freedom. So it's this case of Cynthia West, who is out there, the hush money. Just understand that it is her word against both Thomas Massie and Sparks, who is the Congresswoman, Victoria Sparks of Indiana.
And logic and time
and
frames.
Logic. Yeah, and the timeline, none of it makes any sense. Again, this is after his wife died, unlike Trump, who doesn't wait for his wife to die before he starts finding other girlfriends, porn stars and stuff like that. This is somebody that Massie met who lived in Florida. He wanted her to move to D.C., so he said, let me help you find a job with somebody in terms of staff. And he helped to get her a position in this other congressional office. And she said, well, I don't have any money because my ex-husband, is not paying me alimony and support. So he loaned her $10,000. She gave back $5,000 of it. And then she said, well, he tried to bribe me with $5,000 to be quiet and to stop the lawsuit that I had against the woman who hired her. The reality is she had a temporary contract for 60 days. They did not renew the contract. I wonder why. And so then she sued them. And the congressional office said, well, we'll offer you a settlement. She refused the settlement, which was far more than what she accused Massie of trying to bribe her with. And the person that hired her, Victoria Sparks, said in a statement, she said, West was not fired. Her office chose not to extend her temporary 90-day employment due to, quote, concerning conduct by Ms. West, adding that the complaint against her office came a few months later, and she had denied this and refused to settle. So Massie said, it's a sad thing that a week before an election, people are making false, unsubstantiated allegations about me, an obvious attempt to influence the outcome of this election. And they're not just cooking up these false accusations, but they're matching it with $5 million in just the last week to run these additional ads that are lies and slander. So Victoria Sparks defended Massie in her statement. She said he's one of the strongest supporters of women in Congress, a defender of women's rights among her GOP colleagues. Can't say that about Trump, can you? But again, this is Newsweek, W-E-A-K. They talk about everything except the elephant in the room, which is AIPAC and the Zionist lobby. As a matter of fact,
today I introduced a bill called the AIPAC Act. You'll see this come up. Nobody knows this. I'm debuting it on your show right now, which would make AIPAC subject to Foreign Agent Registrations Act. For some reason, they're immune right now. And I think not just the money that's spent in politics, but the lobbying that happens on Capitol Hill should be reported if it's a foreign country, whether it's Great Britain,
absolutely,
Australia,
it should
Turkey, Qatar, or Israel. It needs to be reported.
And the amount of money that goes to these influencers, it's really interesting. You'll see them sort of all, publishing the same attacks online almost simultaneously.
They got their talking points.
They're all on the same page, and it's like they're receiving talking points.
They're trained
they should
SEALs.
Have to disclose that they're receiving this money, right?
Whether it's Jesse SEALs or it's Navy SEALs.
I've said this so many times. When I sleep, I think about it. I'm Thomas Massie, and I approve this message. I'm Thomas Massie, and I approve this message. That's either at the front or the end of every commercial I do. And when I send out a piece of mail, it says who did it, and, my campaign, Thomas Massie for Congress, approved by Thomas Massie for Congress, paid by. And we need that. I believe we should have that same sort of truth in advertising on social media, because if it's a good idea in the other outlets, it would be a good idea on social media, particularly because so much of it is foreign money. I remember all of these complaints about election interference, fraudulent elections, and the Russians being involved, and who else being involved.
And bots, right?
But really, the elections are being influenced online.
Yeah, they want you to be concerned about bots. They want to make sure that we don't have any anonymity or free speech on social media. But they don't want you to be concerned about the congressmen who've been bought. That's the reality.
I cannot wait for May 19th. It's going to be so great. Just in case I lose, they gave me the number to call to concede. The area code is Tel Aviv, though.
Well, I hope that works for him. We've had situations. I remember when George Soros was buying elections for district attorneys and even for state attorneys general. And typically, the only people who were able to push back on that and win, because he would drop in millions of dollars into these, what had been really cheap local elections. The people who were able to beat him back were the people who called him out on it. You have to call out this outside money. These people have an agenda that is not the agenda of the people who are there. As a matter of fact, when you look at the agenda of both War Pete and Ed, the trained SEAL, this is what the guy has to say. Yeah, look at that. Surprise, a giddy Pete Hegseth drops in after Ed Galerine promises to bring back the draft. I want war. I want war for Israel, and I want the draft back. Well, that sounds like a winning combination, doesn't it? He certainly is not interested in the things that affect us personally, except for the fact that war impoverishes us and endangers our lives, even here at home. We're not going to be immune from this. We have been in the past, but technology is changing. What Massie is concerned about are things like Donald Trump giving legal immunity to companies that want to poison us and give us cancer, like Bayer with glyphosate.
Well, I support obviously the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment. Fourth Amendment is privacy. 10th Amendment is states' rights. But I also support
you
the
think
Seventh
Trump
Amendment.
could even say what those amendments are about?
These are amendments in the Bill of Rights that people have long since forgotten. What is the Seventh Amendment? The right to a jury trial. They're trying to get immunity for data centers, for pesticides, for big tech when they steal inventions from little guys. They're trying to get all kinds of immunity and prevent jury trials. This is something that's not even on people's radar, but it has shown up on radar, and we've been successful. We got it struck from the Farm Bill. They were trying to put immunity for glyphosate in there, which is an herbicide.
Yeah, and of course you got people like the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, famously saying, "Oh, we can't do search warrants." Can you imagine how long that would take us to do search warrants? Yeah, just like George III, right? So again, Hegseth stumping for a candidate like this is a big break from what is normal. Now, a lot of people have said that it's a violation of the Hatch Act. Well, the Hatch Act, as I see it, is very subjective, but it doesn't look to me like it is a violation of the Hatch Act. It is a violation of norms. It is a violation of decorum. But of course, Pete Hegseth is a walking violation of what is normal, what is decorum. He is a walking violation of what is Christian, as he calls himself a Christian nationalist. But nevertheless, he accuses Thomas Massie of aiding America's enemies. Well, actually, he is he's not aiding America's enemies, because America's enemies are Donald Trump and War Pete. They are the greatest enemies. They represent the greatest enemies. They represent the Zionist-occupied government. They represent people who trash the Constitution, who trash the domestic law, the internal rules of the Pentagon, and international law and treaties and conventions on warfare. These are people who declare war themselves in defiance of the Constitution. These are people who kill survivors who are non-combatants. These are people who start wars of aggression. Folks, they are literally traitors and terrorists. What is a terrorist? A terrorist is somebody who uses violence or the threat of violence to achieve their political ends, right? Does that not describe the entire Trump administration? And Pete Hegseth is the lethality arm of that. Yeah, he's a terrorist. Hegseth is a terrorist. You're a terrorist, a murderer, an immoral person in terms of what you've done. And they're also traitors to the Constitution. They swore to uphold it, and they violated it on every opportunity. So Hegseth's big soundbite was, he said, well, if you're going to be against everything, that becomes an excuse for accomplishing nothing. Well, he may be right about that. Because if you oppose everything that the District of Orwell is doing right now in Washington, you're likely to accomplish nothing, because most of the people that are there are crooks. Yeah, I guess you should say lethality, baby. That's real power, right? Power to kill people. That's what I want. You see, Fox News' Laura Ingraham. Maybe she's auditioning for a position in the Trump administration here. She said, if Massie is a true conservative, then why does everyone on the left want him to win? I just can't get out of this left, right, Republican, Democrat. If the Democrats say something nice about him, he has to be bad. I mean, we can't, even if the Democrats are opposing the war for purely partisan reason, we can't oppose the war. We can't do the right thing because the Democrats are doing it. That's what Laura Ingraham wants you to think. That's what Fox News sells you. It's this Hegelian dialectic. You have to be with us or you're a terrorist type of thing. No, again, if you oppose war, if you oppose Trump's imposed austerity, that's what this inflation is. Trump has become a pain in the gas. You just look at the pump. And again, if you oppose that, then you must be with the Democrats. The Democrats may oppose it for purely partisan reason, but for purely partisan reasons, Laura Ingraham says you can't oppose it when Trump does something wrong. Again, just another suck-up sycophant of Fox News. You spell that F-A-U-X as in faux news, who probably wants a position in the Trump administration. Then National Review. It's kind of interesting because National Review went to war with the John Birch Society. And the John Birch Society, and that was when William F. Buckley was there, heavily involved with the CIA. Buckley was. He wrote novels about it. It was rumored that he was with them. And of course, they loved him on NPR, didn't they? But he hated the John Birch Society. People who loved the Constitution. People who would rank people according to their fidelity to the Constitution, their fidelity to economic stability, their fidelity to individual liberty. And of course, Massie is ranked 99, I believe, by their rankings at the John Birch Society. But they threw out Joe Sobran, who was their editor, really good editor, because he said, I don't think, as he was America First, he said, I don't think we need to be giving money to Israel or anybody else. You know, he was a Pat Buchanan conservative. He said, you know, let's not have this overreaching American empire. That's not what this country was founded on. It's not in the interest of our country. It's not in the interest of Americans to do this. This is a small cabal of people in Washington who want this. And so they called him anti-Semitic. It was, as a matter of fact, you know, what National Review did to Joe Sobran when they kicked him off as editor was the first time I saw the Israeli lobby come after somebody who didn't want them to have a blank check from the American taxpayer, coming after him with charges of being racist. He was not racist. And so National Review is doing it again. They're coming after Thomas Massie. They wrote an op-ed piece, a headline, Thomas Massie deserves to lose, they said. This is coming from National Review. We have a lot of time for quirky, go-it-alone libertarians, they said, but we prefer if they aren't noxious critics of Israel. Well, you know, I prefer my conservatives to be fans of America, not puppets of Israel, like National Review. They disgust me. And they called him, they said he's pushing fringy, toxic ideology. That's right. You cannot criticize Israel, especially at National Review. Just understand that National Review is not what it pretends to be. They went on to say in their op-ed piece, it's telling that a pro-Massie super PAC is running an ad in the race that portrays the billionaire investor and anti-Massie donor, Paul Singer, billionaire, who is Jewish, alongside a rainbow-colored Star of David. Well, it is telling. It's telling the truth, because this guy in Israel has been one of the key pushers from the very beginning of this LGBT stuff. And he is a Zionist. Why not put the Zionist Star of David? And by the way, that's not a Jewish symbol from Moses. That is a pagan symbol that was adopted by the Zionists when they began that movement back in the 1800s. So, yeah, if you oppose war and Zionism, National Review says it is fringy, toxic ideology. let me tell you, the National Review is toxic ideology. Always pushing war. National Review is like Lindsey Graham. I remember their comment. It was pithy, but it was abhorrent. They said before the Iraq War, they said, the U.S. can and should reduce the Iraqi military to twisted metal. Why should we? Because Netanyahu said so? Is that why? So again, Trump says Massie has to be thrown out of office for opposing him. He's sounding increasingly desperate, isn't he?
I hope you're going to put him out of business tomorrow. I'm in the Oval Office, and we're in a fight against the worst congressman in the history of our country. His name is Thomas Massie. He's from Kentucky. I hope you're going to put him out of business tomorrow. He is so bad. Got it elected.
Yeah, so he's worse than Adam Schiff, is he? He's worse than Nancy Pelosi. He's worse than Lindsey Graham. And I could go on and on and on. We got a long list about, what is it? We got 535 of them. There's 534 names I could run through. Every single one of them is abhorrent. This is the only guy that is there holding the line for the Constitution. Well, and you notice that Trump doesn't have any specific issues with how Massie has betrayed the Constitution or the American people, which Trump does continuously. Yes, Lance?
He's the worst senator as far as Israel is concerned.
Yeah, that's right.
What Trump cares about.
That's right. So, again, he made some amazing statements. He said that Massie was in favor of the transgender mutilation of our children. You see, if you are a Zionist billionaire like Paul Singer or Miriam Adelson or Donald Trump, Zionist billionaires have no trouble at all making up lies. They'll tell you to your face. There's an absolute lie that he is pushing transgender mutilation of children. And he said he voted against tax cuts. No, he voted because you cut taxes and you increased spending at the same time. Massie said, you can tell that I'm ahead in the polls and they're desperate. That's why they're sending the Secretary of War to my district tomorrow. He said that on Sunday. But apparently it looks like it's working. At least one thing they're doing is they are putting out a narrative, which if you look at the malleability of the mainstream media and their polls, maybe that's their game. Maybe they're going to show that it's close and that Ed is slightly ahead, and then they can pull their usual game of rigging the election and make it believable. They have to do that. They have to get it close because then they can rig it. By the way, folks, this is bigger than Trump versus the Constitution even. It's a reference on whether we're going to be a Zionist-occupied government. Are we going to be controlled by a foreign country? This is a referendum on Zog, and Zog knows it. Trump's tirade against a GOP senator who sponsored the stock trading ban gets a second look a year later. You know, we've seen this massive corruption, in-your-face corruption from this crook Trump. 3,700 trades in 1 quarter. You talk about somebody who is always chickening out, who can't make up his mind whether it's about tariffs or stocks that he should own and at what price. Nevertheless, when you look at this, there was a massive blow up a year ago by Trump against Josh Hawley. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to put some teeth into the insider trading prohibitions. Again, when that first came out, it was called the Pelosi Act because everybody knew Nancy Pelosi was doing it. Incredibly corrupt. And of course, Republicans have talked about this a great deal, but not when it is their beloved leader who is doing it even more so than Nancy Pelosi. And so they did change the Pelosi Act. That was kind of the nickname they gave it. But actually, Josh Hawley put out one. He actually called it the Pelosi Act. He came up with an acronym that spelled out Pelosi. It was, let's see if I can find it here. It was preventing elected leaders from owning securities and investments. Pelosi Act. Well, Trump got really upset about it. Why? Because unlike the original Pelosi Act, this pulled in the president and the vice president. And even though he got furious with Josh Hawley about that, and Josh Hawley put in a disclaimer saying it'll not apply to anybody who's already been elected, right? Well, that's a way of grandfathering in all of the 500 plus crooks that are in the district of criminals right now.
I mean, that's
including
kind of the
Trump.
only way you're going to get something like this passed. Let's prevent all future corruption for the people that aren't in office yet.
That's right. Yeah. We'll make it unattractive for people to want my job. You think you're going to take my job and you're going to become a billionaire with insider trading? Well, think again, pal.
It's sort of a
fenced
good,
that off.
or at least a better version of the typical politician strategy of cutting the rungs off the ladder below you so people can't follow you. It's cutting the rungs off the corruption ladder.
That's right. So Trump in the last quarter did 3,700 trades. That's 40 trades a day. And the people in the business say, I don't understand what's going on with that. I mean, it looks like some kind of a hedge fund with an algorithm that's doing this kind of stuff. It absolutely makes no sense. This is unprecedented. Anyway, the president himself had called for congressional stock trading, but then he objected when Hawley's bill would have applied to him as well. Even though Hawley had secured a de facto exemption for Trump, it still wasn't enough. And so he put him on blast, as some people said. He came after Josh Hawley. He said, Democrats have been trying to target me for a long period of time. Basically saying, I'm an inside trader crook, and this is directed at me. I resemble that remark. Anyway, he said, they're using Josh Hawley, who I got elected twice, as a pawn to help them. He is just a second-tier senator, he said. Yeah, this is the childish trash talking of Donald Trump. What about Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment? Thou shalt not do insider trading. No, it's that thou shalt not speak evil of other Republicans. But he does all the time. NBC News commented on it at the time. They said the tensions between Hawley and the Republican leader reached a boiling point. Yeah. And then you had Rand Paul, who is an opponent of stock trading bans. He granted Hawley the opportunity to mark up his bill. And I don't understand why Rand Paul would oppose that. It is, well, I do understand that what Rand Paul did during the COVID thing, and I've called him out on it in the past. During COVID, Rand Paul had his wife buy stock in Gilead that made remdesivir. Was that insider trading? Looks like it to me. Looks like exactly the same thing that Nancy Pelosi did with her husband. And of course, you have somebody who basically set up a social media account that followed the trades of Nancy Pelosi's husband. Said, you want to become a millionaire? Just buy and sell the stocks that she has her husband buy. So anyway, Hawley and the Democrat that he worked with reached a compromise. They would rename this and change the name away from Pelosi. It would no longer be called the Pelosi Act. And then the compromise was that the ban would not apply to anybody who is already elected and to protect Donald Trump. Nevertheless, Trump still lashed out. Trump doesn't love America, folks. He loves money. And the love of money is the root of all evil, especially the root of Trump's evil. He is a Zog puppet and prostitute. So Thomas Massie versus the Israeli lobby. He says, I'm walking to an airplane to rejoin the most expensive congressional race in the U.S. history. It's turned into a referendum on whether Israel gets to buy seats in Congress. That's exactly what it is. This is not Massie versus Trump. This is Massie versus a foreign government controlling our Congress. He said, what they found out is that my seat is really expensive. Well, they've got the money for it. They'd already spent a record amount, and then they increased it by 50% just as last week to really push these slanderous lies that they concocted in the final days of the campaign. If that isn't a tell, what is? He says the Republican Jewish Coalition, AIPAC, Miriam Adelson, and Paul Singer are all part of the Israeli lobby, and that's where all the money comes from for my opponent. Massie told ABC News, George Stephanopoulos on Sunday, he said, it'll be a referendum on foreign policy, whether Israel gets to dictate foreign policy by buying and bullying members of Congress. I'm the one they haven't been able to bully, so they're putting all of the brunt, the force on me. I'm ahead in the polls, and they're desperate. They're sending the Secretary of War to my district tomorrow. That's Hegseth. That's why AIPAC has dumped another $3 million into the race just this weekend. So of the additional $5 million that got dumped in the last week, $3 million of the 5 was coming in from AIPAC. After months of beating around the bush, one reporter finally said, writes the true story of my race when asked, says Thomas Massie. And the lobbyists are bragging about it, bragging about the fact that they're going to take him out in the same way that Levin said, we got rid of Pat Buchanan. We can cancel people. We can cancel whoever opposes us, whoever stops us from ripping off the American people and sending them to war. Israel has the power to take them out. Think about that. It makes me damn angry. I hate to see my government taken over by a bunch of crooks and criminals who sell out to a foreign country. You are traitors, and you have become terrorists for a terrorist nation, Israel. Republican Jewish Coalition director said he expects we, that's the way he put it, that is the RJC, to win. He does not say that he expects Ed to win. That's because Ed is their puppet, and they are running his race. That's what Thomas Massie said, and he's absolutely right. Here's the head of the Republican Jewish Coalition telling a Chabad gathering that he spent a lot of time talking to Benjamin Netanyahu about the existential threat of the Israeli critical right. Yeah, that's right. Traitors to their country. Absolutely. Literally. Just like Jonathan Pollard. They are traitors to America. That's the Republican Jewish Coalition, AIPAC, the lot of them. Massey's opponent, Ed Galerine, is an empty suit with zero charisma, writes Information Liberation. Ed Galerine says people who vote for him should vote for him because of his top secret record, which Trump has seen, but he can't tell you about it. He'd have to kill you, you know. How many times we see this? I abhor the national security state. It is at the center of everything that has gone wrong with this country after World War II. Whenever they do something criminal, they keep it secret, and they do it in the name of national security. Yes.
I can play that 47.
Yeah, go ahead and play that. Yeah.
Without missing a lick, he turned to me and he goes, Ed, he says, I want you to go home. You talk to your family, you pray on this, and you think about it. I'm going to endorse you in life and whatever you do. You know why he said that? Remember that top secret record?
Yeah, right.
He knows me.
Top secret record.
He knows everything about me.
We do too, pal.
He knows what
it's
I do
no
for
secret
you in uniform.
Who's running you.
He knows what I'll do for you in Washington. I'll be your champion.
Yeah, I'm a mercenary.
I'll serve our party. I'll serve our nation.
I'm a mercenary.
I'm asking for your vote. I'll be here for further questions. I'll answer the ones. I've gone too long. I'm going to share one last thing about this picture, if I could. Of course, I'm most proud of this one back here moving hay. That's 2 seasons. I'm proud of her hay.
Well, as Information Liberation pointed out, it said the GOP mocked Biden for hiding in his basement during the 2020 election against Trump. Galerine has followed exactly the same playbook, and he's let the Israeli lobby spend millions to campaign for him, I would say to lie for him. He had Ken Klippenstein said, I went through all of Ed Galerine's interviews. This guy is laughably deep state. He literally says his background is classified. He cites anonymous endorsements from unnamed national security officials. And he also goes on to say he's made a fool of himself every time he opens his mouth. Asked about the Iran war, he replied, the president is playing 5D chess. Remember, I talked about that yesterday. Actually, the 5D is actually $5 gas that we're getting.
Amazingly, this is a different clip than the one we played yesterday, where I guess he's saying that he's playing 5D chess again. It's 27 seconds if you want me to play it.
No, that's okay. I can only take so much of Ed Galerine, Mark Levin, and Lindsey Graham in a day. So again, he says he's resetting the entire global power structure, so let him work through that. Yeah, that's right. Just trust him. That's what he said. Trust the plan. The contrast could not be more stark. Elderly voters in Massie's district, according to polling, are ready to throw out the finest member of Congress because Trump and some TV ads told them to. And as Massie and others have pointed out, perhaps the reason for the generational split here, as I said before, ages 17 to 55, Massie leads by anywhere from 17 to 56 points. When you look at 56 years old and up, Galerine leads anywhere from 18 to 33 points.
I think it's mostly a matter of where you get your news from. You know,
that's a good point.
Older people still watch Fox News and all that versus people that actually get their information from the internet and see all the complaints about the nonstop ads that AIPAC is buying on those.
Or you see on the internet, you see the back and forth debate that is happening there as free speech. This is why they want to shut it down, which is why Israel has bumped up their, has gone up by a factor of 100 in terms of their spending on propaganda since they began their genocide in Gaza. And again, they will not say why it's not genocide. They will just call you anti-Semitic if you call it genocide. You know, the term genocide was coined by a Jew. His name was Lemkin, and he was talking about what the Turks did to the Armenian Christians. What was it that they did? They tried to kill enough of them to drive out the survivors because they wanted their land. Is that not the policy of Israel in Gaza? And of course, attacking and killing civilians so you can drive them out of their land because you want it? That's precisely what it is. Regardless of what happens, Massie has shown incredible integrity throughout his time in Congress, and his fundraising abilities are truly remarkable, says Information Liberation. They're right about that. But again, when you look at the lies that are put out by the people in the last week, you know, this threesome with AOC and Ilhan Omar, or something that they put out, I don't even know. But as he pointed out, he said older voters who don't know that how AI works look at that and they think it's actually me going on a date with AOC and Ilhan Omar and then checking into a hotel together. That's how childish this stuff was. But I think you're right, Lance. I think it really is where they get their news. They get off of Fox News. They listen to people like Laura Ingraham, who says, well, if a Democrat has something nice to say about, I mean, you know, Trump was going to cover up the Epstein documents, and Massie worked with a Democrat to get them released. So Massie must be bad. Not the Epstein information, not the Epstein elites, not Donald Trump. No, it's the fact that he worked with Democrats to try to get this information released. That makes him bad. That's the juvenile understanding of what's going on, being pushed to these people by Laura Ingraham and her ilk. Imploring voters to say no to woke Eddie Galerine and his billionaire club of LGBT weirdos, he said. Well, again, what'll happen is if Trump wins, you'll see him dancing to the gay national anthem from one of those guys, YMCA. And he will be laughing up his sleeve at the MAGA people who think that he's anti-LGBT. Again, last week he said, we saw a money bomb. We raised $1.3 million for Massie from thousands of small donors. This is Clint Russell writing this. The very next day, Miriam Adelson signed a check for the same amount, $1.3 million. Our Israeli donor... well, not our, but one Israeli donor offset thousands of American voices because Massie forced the Epstein files. Well, you know, what can we say about Miriam? Well, Donald Trump said it all.
Miri, you and Sheldon created a lot of relationship over the years with politicians at the state level, especially at the federal level. I want you to share with everyone why is it so important and how do you do it? Again, writing checks is part of it, but there is more than writing just checks. So how do you do it?
Can you allow me not to answer?
I don't want to say what I'm really doing to America. And of course, Donald Trump was at a a meeting with her, and he said, I don't know. I think she loves Israel more than she loves the U.S. Who do you love more? She wouldn't say, right? And so it says everything, doesn't it? Her silence speaks very loudly. Thomas Massie's introduced this bill, the AIPAC bill that he was talking about earlier. And as a matter of fact, as I said at the beginning of the program, when you look at the people who stand against outside money, whether it's Joe Sobran, whether it's Frank Nicely, whether it's Thomas Massie, they always come after them with a vengeance. And you can't get any more outside than a bunch of Zionist billionaires. Like I said before, they're outside of the country, not just outside the state. They're outside of the Constitution. They are outside of morality. They're the true outsiders. And so he wants to amend the AIPAC Act. The Foreign Registration, he calls it the AIPAC Act, is to amend the Foreign Registration Act of 1938 in order to clarify the definition of foreign principal and to ensure transparency and lobbying on behalf of foreign interests. As he said before, I have to say at the beginning or the end of every commercial, I got to say, I'm Thomas Massie and I approve this message. They don't want you to know who's funding these messages. Since its inception in 1954, AIPAC has circumvented the registration requirements under FARA by virtue of being established as a domestic lobbying organization, legally distinct from the parameters that the Act defined. Again, when we look at it, if you say this is just a domestic organization, you could essentially say that about all the K Street lobbyists. Well, they live in America. This is where they work and so forth. That doesn't mean that they're not agents for a foreign country. AIPAC was created by Isaiah Kennan. He was a lobbyist for the Israeli government. He had previously served under the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He worked as an information director of the American Zionist Council. After he raised $65 million and $73 million in the U.S. Aid for Israel in 1951 and 52, folks, that was huge. Multiply this by the declining amount of the dollar, and you're getting up into hundreds of millions or maybe even billions of dollars. So he was getting worried that the State Department was going to come after him because he wasn't registered as a foreign agent under FARA. And again, he had been a lobbyist for the Israeli government. He had worked for their Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He raised between $65 and $73 million for them in the early 1950s. He was, by every reasonable definition, a foreign agent. But in order to escape that, he created the American Zionist Committee for Public Affairs to navigate around the registration requirements under FARA in response to that concern. Then they renamed that the American Israel Public Affairs Committee in 1959, AIPAC. And again, the AIPAC Act would amend this FARA legislation by adding a fourth paragraph saying, additionally define a foreign principal as any organization, association, corporation, or other entity whose lobbying activities or stated missions is either wholly or in part to influence U.S. public policy or government action in furtherance of the political or economic interests of a foreign country or recognized state-affiliated political entity. It would also establish indicators for determining the foreign political alignment of lobbying firms and allow American citizens to file complaints with the U.S. Department of Justice to request investigations into potential FARA violations, because we know the Trump Department of Justice isn't going to initiate anything against AIPAC. So for some reason, he said, they're immune right now. And I think it's not just the money that's spent in politics, but it's the lobbying that is happening on Capitol Hill that should be reported if it's a foreign country. Whether it's Great Britain, Australia, Turkey, Qatar, or Israel, it needs to be reported. And we need to have more transparency. And so right now, here's the situation, folks. 80 members of Congress, 15% of Congress, list AIPAC as their all-time top contributor. Think about that. 15% of Congress gets more money from AIPAC than from any other special interest group. Isn't that amazing? I find that to be abhorrent, quite frankly. But, of course, Trump bragged about that. He thought that Congress should be owned by Israel. Remember this?
Well, the biggest change I've seen in Congress is Israel literally owned Congress. You understand that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And today it's almost the opposite. You have between AOC and Omar and these people that hate Israel. They hate it with a passion. They're controlling Congress, and Israel is not a force in Congress anymore. It's just...
You need to give me money.
I've never seen
I'll do it for
change.
you. It's a sales pitch.
I'm talking about over a very long period of time. But I think you know exactly what I'm saying. They had such power. Israel had such power, and rightfully, over Congress, and now it doesn't. It's incredible, actually.
Hire me. I'm your goy.
What?
Yeah, let's.
Why do you think, Colonel, President Trump unleashed Prime Minister Netanyahu to resume genocide in Gaza, which unfortunately resulted, I say unfortunately, it was intentional, the killing of 400 civilians in the past 2 days?
I don't think he has any choice. I think when he ran for office, he made certain agreements with major donors. These donors move far beyond just Miriam Adelson, and these donors oblige him to effectively underwrite whatever Mr. Netanyahu wants to do. I thought it was interesting that a recent meeting was set up for the United States with Azerbaijan to talk about cooperation with Israel, but it was set up by Mr. Netanyahu. He called and made the arrangements with Mr. Aliyev, who's the president of Azerbaijan. The State Department did not do it. I think we're very much in the grip of the Israel lobby, and I think President Trump is obliged to go along, and I don't see any evidence that he's going to diverge from that path.
Does he have no choice but to back up Israel militarily when it attacks Iran?
I think so. And keep in mind, you always have the possibility that a war is precipitated somehow by Israel somewhere in the region with Iran. The Iranians respond. And the expectation is, with the buildup of force in the region, we're sending additional carrier battle groups over there right now. The expectation is that we will reinforce whatever the Israelis want to do. We've already done all of the planning for joint strikes and joint strike packages.
If they want to kill all the people in Lebanon, there's nothing that we can do about it, right? Are we worried that Lebanon is creating a nuclear weapon? No, it's because Israel wants their land. They're genocidal terrorists. The stranglehold that the pro-Israel lobby has over the American political system is clear, as the AIPAC Act currently only has a 2% chance of passing, following its referral to the House committee. Think about that. You got 15% of Congress lists AIPAC as their biggest donor. And you've only got a 2% chance of requiring them to register as foreign agents, when in reality we know they all are. This is what we mean by Zionist-occupied government. Boebert is now in the crosshairs for supporting Massie. And again, as not National Review, but the New American, John Birch Society, points out, she has a 93% score on the New American's Freedom Index. One by one, Trump, the New York Democrat, is driving out everybody who's ever voted for conservative principles. And got to get them out. And you got to get out anybody that's not owned by Israel. She said, I knew the risk when I agreed to stand by my friend Thomas Massie. And she knows that it's going to be, what they need to have at this reflecting pool where Trump is so focused on right now. And of course, there was a contract that was out showing that, this massive increase that went up by a factor of 10 in terms of, I think it's 7 actually. It went from like 1.7 million to over 13 million. So it's like a factor of 7. But the reality is that was the original price. It's just that Trump lied to people to get this thing started. And he is so focused on this reflecting pool. Isn't that appropriate for somebody who is such a narcissist? It goes back to the Greek legend of Narcissus, who was so focused on his reflection in the pool. They should make a golden statue of Trump on his hands and knees, staring at his face in the reflecting pool. I think that'd be a perfect reflection of the man. Well, before we take a break, we've got some comments here. Stealth Patriot, thank you very much for the tip. He says, I don't pray as often for our politicians as I should, unless it's for God to protect us from them and their actions. I've been praying for Thomas Massie and those others who stand for the Constitution. Absolutely right. Whenever I hear somebody quote that, pray for your leaders and those in authority, that you might live quiet and peaceful lives and that type of thing. It's like, yeah, pray they leave us alone. That was basically paraphrased in the Fiddler on the Roof. They asked the rabbi, they said, is there a prayer for the czar? And it says, yes, God bless and keep the czar far away from us. Well, Trump wants to be a king, and czar is just another term for that. It comes from Caesar. We had all these different terms. Caesar, czar, you had, let's see, what was the other one that was out there? All of these different, the czar in Russia, as well as all these other, it's just a dictator, just another king. Thank you for the tip. He says, I think people like Massie, they keep people like Massie around, so we can imagine that we have a bloodless revolt against the deep state. Yeah, I don't think, when you look at this, again, one guy, Hegseth was right. You can't have one guy really get anything done. That's what they always said about Ron Paul. He stuck to his principles, and they said, look, he doesn't get anything passed. It's like, that's because the rest of you are such crooks, and because you violate the Constitution all the time. You're the problem, not Ron Paul and not Thomas Massie. But that's the reality. And that's one time that Pete Hegseth told the truth. And we should remember that because he doesn't usually tell the truth. This guy who is a high school football coach wannabe, the way he conducts the Pentagon is ridiculous.
Right in the middle of this big, great reset, and he's getting in the way of everything. He's not letting us attack foreign countries or...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we need that great reset, don't we? And we need to trust them. I keep hearing this all the time. We had Tulsi Gabbard who said, my role here is to restore trust in the intelligence community. Don't ever trust the intelligence community. RFK Jr. says, my role here is to restore trust in public health. Don't ever trust public health. These are two functions that the government should not be involved in, quite frankly. Don't trust them either. G Talent 60 says, Massie will win today unless they implement the usual election chicanery. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. The election chicanery, folks, typically starts way before voting day. Nibiru 2029, the man who is pessimistic before 48 knows too much. If he's an optimist after that, he knows too little. That's right. High Boost. If Massie wins, it is a massive blow to Bibi, Trump, MAGA, and Israel. Let's go. Well, I certainly do hope that he wins, but we'll see. Nibiru 2029, the Clintons played their Trump card in 2015 to ensure the Republican Party's total destruction. That's right. Julian Assange said, he said, well, we know that Hillary Clinton is a criminal and a warmonger, crime monger. We don't know what Donald Trump is. Well, he found out, didn't he? The Trump administration did their best to kill him, put him in jail for many years, and then locked up the rest of us with a lockdown and led the global charge into the COVID fraud, as well as the bioweapon he funded. Jerry Alatalo says, what oversight do you think Kentucky state lawmakers should have over data centers? Yeah, so the first version of the big bill had a provision that would let data centers ignore state laws. That's right. This is, again, Donald Trump and his precedent of attacking the 10th Amendment. This is the usual strategy of big business. They did it with the DARK Act, if you remember, and that revolved around glyphosate and also dicambra drift. They were losing in local elections big time. They would go into even into county areas. They spent $8 million in one county area because they wanted to make sure that glyphosate was not being outlawed. And there were a lot of farmers who knew what the real issue was. They knew this poison drifted onto their land, so they wouldn't be able to raise organic stuff. And so it didn't matter that Monsanto spent $8 million. They still lost. So Monsanto goes to the Obama administration. Oh, now we can talk about how it's bad because it was Obama, right? They go to the Obama administration and they say, we need to be protected against this patchwork quilt of regulations from different states. Well, that was what the design of this country was about. Separation of power. So, we're going to have one set of rules. We want you to make those rules that'll apply nationally so we can do business, right? The Constitution and the function of government is not to make profits for corporations. That's what it's become. But that was not the intention. The intention was to protect the God-given rights of people. And to do that, you separated power. But they always come in, and they did the same thing with the AI data centers, and Trump is leading the charge this time instead of Obama. So now it's a righteous cause because we have the Messiah, Trump, doing it, right? The fake Messiah. And so no criticism at all from the conservatives, except for Massie in terms of doing that. Guard Goldsmith, good to see you, Guard. Thank you for doing such a great job on Friday. I appreciate that. Liberty Conspiracy. He said, by the way, Massie's opponent gets to keep a sizable amount of the donations that are not spent if he loses. Yeah, never forget that. That's a big part of the slush fund for politicians. Yeah, it's not just the insider trading. It's being able to keep the money if you lose, right? Conservative thinker says, if voting is fake, why would they spend so much money to get rid of Massie? Well, it's about manufacturing consent, right? The big role of elections, I think, is to manufacture consent for what they're going to do. And they can always point to it and say, we got a mandate. See, we put this out. This is what we want to do. And this is our guy. This is our goy. This is our puppet. And you all voted for that. So now we have a mandate to rule. They don't appeal to the Constitution for a mandate. They appeal to these elections. That's why it is important to them to keep that facade up. But they have so many ways to control this. It truly is amazing.
Put that comment up partly to respond to everyone. There are a few people in the chat that are pretty down on Massie in general. Mm-hmm. And sure, you may have some things that he did that you didn't agree with, but he's still the best we've got.
Yeah.
If not Massie, then who? Mm-hmm. It's, as you've said, a referendum of not allowing the Israeli lobby to decide who gets to be a senator.
That's right. That is the issue, folks.
Or congressman.
That is the absolute issue. Are we going to be controlled by a foreign government that robs us, picks our pocket, and sends us into war for them? That's exactly what Ed Galerine is about, because that's what his owners are about, his donor owners. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Trump, who is now, today was supposed to be the kickoff of the attack on Iran that he's been promising. But of course, he did another taco nacho. He says he canceled this at the last minute. He just had to do it because there were some Arab leaders who didn't want him to do this. So he's got to pull this back. What a BS artist this guy is. It truly is amazing. But we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
By the way, we're talking about AIPAC and how they are funding Congress and so forth. The people who fund this show, by the way, Let me read out their names. These are checks that we got in the last week. These checks for May. Let me just read out first name and last initial. Thank you so much to all of you. Joni S., Gary B., Judy E., Dale L., HD from NC, Lois L., Marty K., Scott C., Mason H., Joel B., James F., Ronald C., Jack Y., Margaret Mary T., Timothy W., Aaron F., and Karen C. Thank you so much. And thank you for the birthday card as well from Lois. I appreciate that. Many people sent me birthday cards. My birthday was the end of April, and many birthday wishes. And thank you, all of you. I have not thanked each and every person, but I really do appreciate it and appreciate the encouragement. And we are at, I think, about 50% right now in the gas gauge. So we're closing in on the goal, and want to thank all of you. By the way, Trump has announced that he's canceled this attack on Iran. I just played for you yesterday the kind of the spaghetti western parody that Iran did of Donald Trump. He's gunning for this guy who's sitting in a bathtub filled with suds, right? And he comes in boasting about how he's going to wipe out their civilization, do this and do that and everything to him. And the guy's got a gun underneath the soap bubbles, and he just shoots him. He says, either do it or shut up. I'm tired of hearing about it. It's like, yeah, the good, bad, and the orange is what they should have called that. But again, Trump is the king of BS. Just like, John Lovett. Remember, he said, well, yeah, Israel, Rubio said we had to do it, and he admits it. First Rubio said it, and then Donald Trump admitted it. He said, yeah, they were going to attack, and that was going to put us in jeopardy. So we decided we would join them to try to defend ourselves after they attack. But you could say that I'm the one who did it. Yeah, that's the ticket, just like John Lovett, the liar. You can see him just making this stuff up as he's monologuing about this kind of stuff. And again, he did it again when he said, yeah, we don't really need to get the nuclear stuff. I had just obliterated it. He'd said that once before, last summer. But it was now an imminent threat. Was it an imminent threat? No, what he said, we don't really need to get that dust. He told Sean Hannity just this last week. He said, we got eyes on it. Nobody's going anywhere near it. Here's a translation for the MAGA people, the multitude of asinine, gullible Americans. When he says we obliterate it, and when he says nobody's gone near that, that means that there is no imminent threat, which means that what he did is completely unconstitutional and illegal. Constitution requires that Congress declare war, and the War Powers Act is a law that says that you go to Congress unless it is an imminent threat. It was not an imminent threat. Well, we have one guy who I've not seen this name before, and I'm not sure I can even pronounce it. Chamath Palihapitiya, I guess. I think he's from India, and he has written an op-ed piece, and he says, I think Taiwan loses its strategic importance in 18 months. What is their strategic importance? Well, the fact that they are manufacturing semiconductor components. If you look at NVIDIA and other people like that, they don't do their own manufacturing, right? That's what they call fabless. They don't have any fabrication. And I was surprised to see that even Texas Instruments, who I used to work for, doesn't do that. I mean, when I went to work for them, that was what they were offering themselves for. They offered themselves out to people like Apple Computer or Samsung or somebody who's putting proprietary chips in their cell phones, and they'd say, well, you design the chip and we will manufacture it for you in our fabrication facilities. Well, they started getting out of that. Even as right after I left, they started getting out of that. They were having a great deal of difficulty at Texas Instruments manufacturing the state-of-the-art memory chips. As a matter of fact, they were getting essentially zero yield, their facility in Houston. They did have a Japanese facility where they were getting some pretty good yield, and that was where they were getting all of their manufacturing stuff. Again, the people who they were hiring in in Houston where I worked, my friends and I, we were in a slightly different group. We were doing semi-custom semiconductors. And so a lot of the fabrication had already been done. and just the final stages of it, where you would connect up the different transistors, is what was being customized for people. And yet, over at the facility where they're making the state-of-the-art memory chips, we would go over there to the cafeteria or whatever. We would see these guys walking around. They would have these clean room outfits where they would have suits that they put on. They put on booties on their shoes. They would cover their hair with like a shower cap type of thing. But they had to be cool, right? So they would go out to the break area, taking a break, and you would see them walking around with these covers that were on their shoes, still on their shoes. It's like, so you realize that defeats the purpose, right? And then to look cool, they would take the shower cap and cock it back on their head. And it's like, I wonder why we're getting zero yield. It was the dumbest thing I'd ever seen. But the guy who started Taiwan Manufacturing, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, TSMC, that guy worked for Texas Instruments for decades, like 20 or 30 years or something. And as he was getting close to retirement, he was pretty well known. As a matter of fact, he didn't work just for Texas Instruments. He also worked for General Instruments and many others. And so he had pretty good reputation. The Taiwanese government, he wanted to retire and go home to Taiwan. The Taiwanese government offered to give him some money and to start fabrication there. And it was very successful. And it is huge compared to the economy that is there. So again, when you look at his accomplishment that was there, it truly is amazing. He had, let me see if I can find this here. Yeah, Trump attacked Taiwan, dumping on Taiwan, as a matter of fact. And he was saying things like, should the people of Taiwan feel more or less secure after a meeting with President Xi? Asked Brett Baer. And he goes off on a riff saying they stole our chip industry. No, they didn't steal the chip industry. They just did something that we weren't capable of doing. And then he goes on to say, well, it's 59 miles away, 59 miles. We are 9,500 miles away. So in other words, they're 59 miles away from China, but we're 9,500 miles away. I guess you could say the same thing about Israel, couldn't you? Except he doesn't. Yes. We have the video of Trump talking about Taiwan allegedly stealing the... Yeah, go ahead and play that. Yeah.
$12 billion, it's a lot of weapons. But, when you look at the odds, China's a very, very powerful, big country. That's a very small island. It's, you think of it, it's 59 miles away, 59 miles. We're 9,500 miles away. That's a little bit of a difficult problem. With all of that being said, if you look at the history of Taiwan, Taiwan was developed because we had presidents that didn't know what the hell they were doing. Because if they would have put tariffs on chips coming in, they would have never left. Everything was about Intel, and everything was about our chip companies. They stole our chip industry. So I've said that for years. I said, for years they stole our chip. If we would have had one of our presidents just say, we're going to put 100% chip. You can leave, you can build in Taiwan, but you sell it back into the United States. We're going to put 100% or 200% tariff. We would have never lost a chip. We lost the chip industry.
He doesn't know anything
coming back. And I do
about
say
anything.
Taiwan.
Let me just jump in here and say, the guy that I was talking about, I looked at his name is Morris Chang, and he left the American companies in 1986. From 87 to 2005, he was CEO of this company now that has it's the largest corporation in Taiwan. I thought I wrote it down here, but I didn't. It's a pretty large chunk of their gross domestic product comes from this one company, TSMC. He had worked for Sylvania. He had worked for Texas Instruments. He worked for General Instruments. And, when you talk about stealing the chip industry away from us, like I said, what I saw at Texas Instruments was that they were getting really low yields. They were not operating very well. So while he was still there, they started moving towards making digital signal processing chips and other things like that. They are now totally fabless. They don't do any manufacturing. They farm it out to other companies like TSMC. That's why it's become such a strategic issue, and why, if there is a war, it is going to become a global problem, just like the Strait of Hormuz. If you shut down TSMC and the Taiwan chip industry, you got big problems. People are going to have big problems for everything. NVIDIA uses their fabrication facilities that are there. But again, it was the choice of American companies to get out of the fabrication industry because they weren't able to compete effectively. They didn't steal anything from anybody. But if you want to take this same approach, when you look at the Strait of Taiwan, only 59 miles wide, it's not that much different than the Strait of Hormuz. You think Trump learned something? Is he finally taking people's advice on things? I don't know. But again, so we're 9,500 miles away. It's not our business. I wish he would say that about Israel. But of course, there isn't a Taiwanese equivalent of AIPAC in this country, is there? They're not buying congressmen left and right like Israel. That's the big difference right there. Now, this guy was saying he doesn't think that the Chamath guy says he doesn't think that Taiwan is going to be strategically important in 18 months. He said, right now they are important for 3 reasons. Number one, it is indispensable to the global semiconductor production. That's what he thinks is going to change. Number two, it sits at the center of the Western Pacific security architecture, and it remains a major flashpoint in U.S.-China relations. So if we just give up on all of it, we can remove number 3. Number 2 remains, and then number 1 is actually questionable. You know, the interesting thing I think about all this stuff is that Trump likes the American military-industrial complex, the American empire. It makes him powerful. It makes him, it feeds his ability to bully people. But the reality is that by using it this way, he's destroying that power in the same way that Biden, by weaponizing the fiat dollar, a major source of power, by weaponizing that, Biden undercut it. What he did when he started applying sanctions and using SWIFT and other parts of that to control people economically, what he did was he started pushing people away from that system. The same thing is happening in terms of geopolitics, which again is really ego politics when Trump does it. It's not about what is happening geopolitically. So he goes on to say, well, we're 18 months from Taiwan not being important in terms of fabrication. And he thinks there's going to be some miraculous change and all this stuff. I don't see that happening, quite frankly. I think American industry has gotten lazy. They have been spoiled by massive amounts of money from the U.S. government. The money was easy, and they eased off instead of being competitive. So the rise of U.S. chip fabs, many of which were based in Arizona, could soon turn the state into the new Taiwan. Well, here's the reality of this, and I talked about this about a year ago. The Biden administration put together the CHIPS Act, and it is a classic case of trying to subsidize industries that aren't working, trying to pick winners and losers. But of course, Trump is a Democrat as well. He does the same type of thing. And so when you look at what this guy is saying, he says, well, you know, they poured billions of dollars have been given to Intel. And in Arizona, they gave billions of dollars to this TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. They opened up a large facility. They had American engineers who went to Taiwan and trained, and they came back here, as a matter of fact. But it's a big issue with the American engineers. They said, you know, when we're working here, we're not liked by the Taiwanese. They want you to absolutely have your entire life wrapped up in the company. And so we'll have the Taiwanese engineers will be here. And even if there's nothing to do, they will stay in order to virtue signal their loyalty to the company. I'm not going to do it, said the American engineers. And I don't blame them. I mean, that's part of their corporate culture. And it is that kind of obsession that makes them competitive. But I wouldn't want that. I don't think any of us would want that. And so the American engineers are not, kind of having a culture clash with these people because they're not going to stay around the clock and sleep there at the facility just to virtual signal their loyalty to the corporation. And so there's a lot of issues. The Taiwanese don't trust the Americans. They're not giving them the kind of training. All the hallmarks are that this massive, quote unquote, investment, this massive subsidy is the reality of this by the Biden administration and the Trump administration is going to fail. They are not going to turn into Taiwan in the desert. Not at all. Nobody thinks that's going to happen except for some of these Pollyannas who trust government. So he said, this is Trump's perspective. Said one guy who is a geopolitical risk analyst, I should say, that the only thing that matters about Taiwan is the chips. But that is a very different perspective from all the U.S. allies in the region. Japan, South Korea, Australia, they see a rising militarized China. Trump only sees the chip competition, and he hasn't a clue as to what that is about. He thinks they stole it from us. No, it isn't ours to own. You have to compete in a free market. That's what he doesn't get. That's why I guess he's had so many businesses that have failed. But again, it's just another paper fiat currency tiger that we're looking at. Perhaps what we're 18 months away from is the American empire crashing and burning. And there was an interesting metaphor of that, I think, that happened yesterday. You had at an air show, you had a couple of American jets who collided, locked together, and then crashed to the ground. You can see the parachutes of the four personnel on. There's two people on each of these fighter jets. Here's a clip of that. Look at this. They locked together, and there's the parachutes going out. Look at that. So everybody survived, but it crashes and burns and it's a fire. I think that's a great metaphor for where the American empire is headed, quite frankly. The Iranians are saying that if Trump wants to use the Navy to try to open up these straits, that the Gulf of Oman could become a graveyard for the U.S. fleet. Well, maybe the Hormuz disastrous arrogance, Trump is finally listening to some people. Maybe that's why he backed off. I wouldn't count on it, though. Hormuz and all the rest of the stuff, Trump is becoming a royal pain in the gas, isn't he? Just look at the price. Trump is still secretly trying to exert more control over Greenland. He's still planning on a war with Cuba. I mean, what is going on with this guy? War, war, war. He's Lindsey Graham's favorite president now. That should tell you everything. So speaking of farcical, because again, we had that's what the American intelligence analyst, the Trump's CIA guy, Ratcliffe, said, you know what Netanyahu and the Israelis are telling you is absolutely farcical. Well, Trump is still secretly trying to exert more control over Greenland. Yeah, the Trump presidency, I think, gets an F. And the F is not simply for failing. The F is for farcical. That's where we are. But they're still alarming the people in Greenland and people in Denmark about their designs on Greenland. And as all of this is happening over the weekend, again, we had the prayer weekend, supposedly. And you don't need to have government call you to pray, right? That's the key issue with this. When we look at Trump's Religious Liberty Commission and how they kicked off somebody who criticized Israel, said, well, you're anti-Semitic and you don't have the liberty to say that. You're going to control somebody's speech. You also control their religion. Those two things are connected, especially when it is political speech. You're not allowed to criticize the Israeli government because it is a religion to these conservatives and the people who are running this project. Well, so they have a weekend of prayer. And again, the Bible calls us to pray, so I don't care what the American government says about praying for your leaders. And at the center of it all was Trump declaring a national Sabbath. And at the middle of the weekend, what they did was they elevated Israel and the rabbinical Judaistic religion that has now taken the place of what people think. If they read the Bible, the Old Testament, that is nothing at all like Judaism today. Nothing at all like it. And so over the weekend, they were pushing their version of rabbinical Judaism on people. And what you see with that at the center of it, they said, well, this is National Jewish Heritage Month. We don't have a National Christian Heritage Month. Isn't that interesting? We have a National Jewish Heritage Month because, we all know that all the founding fathers were Jewish. Well, no, most of them were Freemasons, but they were not Jewish. And so then you have Eric Metaxas, who on Sunday, holding his worship service of the Trump, had this to say. Let me find this clip here. This is, here we are right here.
It's hard to believe that it would take 2 centuries for the Lord to raise up a great man to bring that finally to stand where it needs to stand. It's extraordinary. We only had to wait 200 years.
For the ballroom, he says.
For the ballroom. And I guess you spell ballroom B-A-A-L because that's what Baal or Baal, as I used to always pronounce it. That's what it means, the Lord, right? It's a fake Lord, an anti-God Lord, and that's where these guys are. It's their ballroom, B-A-A-L, to Baphomet or Moloch or whatever.
I just find it hilarious that he's like, it's finally happened. It only took 200 years for him to make the ballroom. The dream of America has been realized. The founders wanted this ballroom, but they just couldn't achieve it. They could, defeat the British, but building a ballroom was beyond them. And
if only we could be like Marie Antoinette, right? Let them have a ball instead of letting them have cake. That's right. Yeah, that was their dream, wasn't it? So then after he came under withering criticism, and here's an example of some of this, as one person said, we already have a ballroom. So the U.S. government already has a ballroom just down the street. The Andrew Mellon Auditorium is less than a mile away from the White House. It is beautiful. It accommodates more people than the new ballroom will. And it is owned by the U.S. government. How about that? We've already got one. And it's probably more beautiful than what Trump is going to build because we're seeing the enshittification of everything, including architecture, everywhere.
I don't know. I'm not seeing any gold-covered everything there. It could use a few more statues of Trump.
That's right. That'll make it more beautiful, won't it? Anyway, so after getting all kinds of criticism, he says, well, that was just sarcastic humor. Did that sound like humor to you? I don't know. Maybe that's what passes for humor with the MAGA crowd now. I don't know. We always hear that, don't we? They erect gold statues of him, and they say, no, we're not really worshiping Trump. That was just a joke that we put up there. I've heard that over and over again. No, it isn't. It is idolatry. We all see it. They are the ones who are the jokes. And if it is a joke, I guess it's the kind of joke that Babylon Bee has become. Babylon Bee now is the joke. They're no longer funny, no longer satirical. And Eric Metaxas is not funny or satirical in any of this either. He was called out on his idolatry. The Lord picked this guy to build a ballroom. Yeah, that's right. So it's hard to believe that it takes 2 centuries for the Lord to raise up a great man to bring that ballroom finally to stand where it needs to stand. We've heard that over and over again from these people. God raised up Trump. Yeah, the question is, I believe that as well. I don't think there's anything that happens in this world that isn't under God's control. If there is, then he's not God. However, the question is, what is the purpose of Trump?
Yeah, I don't think
is it to punish us or to bless us? Yes.
For a ballroom such as this, I have raised you.
That's right. Yeah, paraphrase Mordecai talking to Esther, right? Truly the arc of redemptive history bends toward banquet, said one person, a commenter. That was Kaylee Triller. Another one says, God created America so that we could make a ballroom for our wannabe king, says Eric Metaxas. Another person, this is Matt Royer, he says, yeah, we only had to wait 200 years for the dream of the founding fathers to be realized, a royal ballroom that King George III would be proud of. Yeah. Well, again, we've got King Trump the Turd who is God promised us the ballroom 200 years ago, said Reason and Theology. Now that is satire. All four Gospels warn us about this kind of excrement. They warned us 2,000 years ago. And here we are today, said Josh Cowan. Another person, Aaron Melnick, said, founders believed in a separation of church and state because they knew that it would corrupt religion to intertwine it with the public. And here we are. How many times have I said that? I said the importance is that you put a wall. What Jefferson said was, he said there's a wall around the state, essentially, to protect it from you. And because if it unifies with you, it always corrupts. I said when you add the state to the church, what you wind up with is the state. It takes over everything. That is its natural bent. Christian nationalism is a political, spiritual, and moral cancer, said another, and I absolutely agree with that. Absolutely. Both of those are essentially the same thing. Bingo. These guys get the comment of the award here, I think. So they absolutely refer to it as the ballroom, B-A-A-L, behind closed doors, don't they? Another one said, well, I'm just flipping through the Bible, trying to find that verse about a ballroom so I can show it to Eric Metaxas. Speaking of people who don't understand where they fit in all of this, we have Elon Musk is comparing Neuralink and the work that he's doing there to that of Jesus. And how many times have I said that as well? I said, these guys, he's out there saying, we're going to get the blind to see, the lame to walk, the dumb to speak. And now he is actually making that connection to Jesus. I said, they're going to put this out as a kind of fake miracle. He said, describing Neuralink's work, he says, it has enabled people who have completely lost their brain-body connection to be able to speak again. And I think it will enable people to walk. He goes on to say, restoring control of people who are tetraplegics and restoring sight, I think, is a pretty big deal. I don't know. I've always seen that as quadriplegic. Quad and tetra both mean four. I don't know. Anyway, he says they're sort of what I would call Jesus-level technologies. No, Jesus created the DNA. Jesus breathed life into things. You're not doing that. You're just manipulating what he's already created. And just like these other transhumanists who believe the foundational lie of the Garden of Eden, told by their master, Satan, you will become like God and you will live forever. No, you won't. No, you won't. Only Christ has the gift of eternal life. And it is a gift. It's not anything that you can earn. It is something that he offers for free. But Musk also said that Tesla will have autonomous vehicles. He said the car is starting to feel like it is sentient. As we improve the software, you can feel the sentience growing in the car. It feels alive. Does it? Well, to what purpose? Well, cars are fast becoming. Yes.
It feels alive as long as you buy the $200 a month sentient package that I've just released.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it is starting to come alive, but again, to what purpose? Well, as one headline puts it, and this is Steve Watson got this one right. He said, cars are fast becoming dystopian prison pods. That's right. The surveillance state has found the newest frontier, your car's dashboard. What used to be a symbol of American freedom and independence is rapidly morphing into a high-tech cage that watches your every move and can override your decisions at will. Here's an example of a guy who's got a new Subaru, and it's got what they call AI eyesight.
All right, I got to come on here and vent real quick. My wife got a new car through her work. It's a brand new, it's got no miles on it, brand new 2025 or 2026, I imagine, Subaru Outback. And it's got the feature where it says, or it's the eyesight thing. So it's got a camera on the dash. If you veer off for 2 seconds, like if you look away like this, or if you're looking outside, I got mountains around us, right? So I'm looking at the mountains. It'll flash and beep and say, keep eyes on road. changing my music on Spotify for 2 seconds, and it's flashing saying, keep eyes on road. I get the idea of it, but this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in a car.
I don't want one either. As a matter of fact, I've seen even before Subaru. Volkswagen had an ad that they put out, and it showed a woman who was driving down the interstate, and she nods off asleep, and the car just moves over to the shoulder of the road and stops. And so, they're going to use safety as the MacGuffin, but we all understand that whether they sell it as safety or whether they sell it as emissions, the real purpose of all this is a dystopian surveillance society. Safety and emissions and climate issues are simply MacGuffins that they use for that. So, again, one person says, well, Subaru's just turned your car into a snitch. This is the government's wet dream of 1984 Orwellian BS. Another person says, so this thing will go off if you look into your mirror or over your shoulder to see if it's safe to take a turn or change a lane or to brake. What a great idea.
Yeah, and people are going to start, rigidly looking forward and never glancing to the side so that it doesn't trigger this thing and get a warning sent to their insurance company telling them, hey, this guy is distracted all the time because he's looking in his mirrors. He doesn't keep his eyes only straight forward. And that will drive people to self-driving cars.
And we know that'll be the case because, again, these car companies are not going to lose the opportunity to monetize that. If they can make money by reporting you to the insurance company or to the government for the way that you are driving, they will turn that data over to them.
Yeah, and they'll have all these excuses of safety, but just stop and think for a second that you've got a camera connected to an AI staring at you 100% of the time.
That's right.
How is this not freaking people out just from a privacy standpoint, even if you believed it was actually about safety?
I think there's going to be an aftermarket for all this kind of stuff to get this thing turned off. I mean, I pulled out the airbag on my steering wheel and I got rid of the catalytic converter and some other things like that on my car. So I imagine there's going to be an aftermarket for this kind of stuff. What a great idea, says one person. It's all tunnel vision on what is only in front of us and ignore everything else. What could possibly go wrong? And then this is the key. And I think this is where they miss the point here. One person says, well, if they all go bankrupt, they'll stop this garbage. No, they won't, because this is what, to push you on to public transportation or to make sure that you don't get any movement or transportation at all is really what the government is pushing for in their 15-minute cities. But my entire life, the government as well as urban planners have been saying, we don't want people to have cars. We don't want you to have freedom and mobility. We want to lock you down. And so if you don't buy these cars, that's exactly what they want. They want the end of private transportation. Just look at how that was our only escape valve back in 2020. Yeah.
And as for, a big aftermarket for getting rid of this stuff, they're going to regulate that away. They're going to do the same sort of laws that they're trying to pass currently for 3D printers, where it cannot be modified by the end user. You will not own your car by legislation. It will be legally the property of the company that never truly sold it to you.
Yeah, it'll be prohibited and it'll be black market, but I predict it'll happen anyway.
Yeah, but it's things like with
drugs are prohibited and they are black market, but they happen anyway.
Yeah, things with like the 3D printer manufacturers, they have regulations about how you have to glue the case and make the software hardened against modifications and all that, and the companies that are making it have to abide by that when they sell it.
Yeah, absolutely right. There's a company that does aftermarket fit-ups on Miatas. They would squeeze in a Corvette V8 engine into them, which I think completely changes the characteristic of the car. I was not interested in that, but I thought it was an interesting project. There's a company called Flying Miata, and they have done that with every generation of Miata. Until they got to, they said it was kind of difficult with the third generation, my generation, because they're starting to put some electronic controls in it. They said when they got the latest one, the fourth generation, they said it was nearly impossible because they said, we would go in and we would disconnect that and then everything would go haywire on it. The windshield wipers would start operating randomly and all this other kind of stuff. And so it is really all interconnected with all that stuff. And I imagine it would be really, really difficult to do that. Probably your best route would just be to do a car from scratch.
And from a software standpoint, they'll try and lock it down and then use the Digital Millennium Copyright Act thing to come after anyone that tries to put out a software thing to get around it, which is exactly what Bamboo Labs, the 3D printer company, is doing currently. They based their software off of an open source thing that said anything that you build from this base has to be open source. But they're ignoring that and trying to come after people that are posting their own versions of it.
Yeah, we see that happening with copyright trolls all the time. That's basically what Bamboo is doing as well. Well, I think Watson and some of these commenters miss this when they say, well, the answer is just to boycott buying new cars. They said the only real answer is to reject and to refuse to buy these surveillance vehicles and support the politicians who fight the mandates. Well, the problem is the politicians are owned by Israel. Israel likes this stuff. Israel is, and the District of Orwellian Criminals likes all this stuff. All these different governments like it. You know, when you look at the Netanyahu government, they came after their own people throughout all of COVID. They turned them into lab rats to be surveilled and sold them out to the corporations. Our government does the same thing as well. And what they want is they want you to not have any private vehicles. That's the real issue. And just by not buying a private vehicle, that's not going to be the solution to it. I think the real solution, I'll just throw this out, I think it's the same type of thing that we have seen with guns and whiskey, for example. You have the federal government has imposed all kinds of regulations for alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. But you do have situations where locally they can override that stuff. I don't like all of the stills that have popped up here in this area for vacation stuff and everything. But it shows that you can override what the federal government wants. And so they passed that. We've had some other situations in other states where they've talked about, well, as long as it doesn't cross state lines, we can let people come into this state and manufacture guns and ignore what the ATF is doing. That's going to create a nullification issue, but it is something that really can be done. The Constitution is on our side, and if you got the people on your side, you could do something like that. You could do the same thing with cars. You go in and say, we're going to allow people to have real cars, and they're not going to have all of these bells and whistles that make them unaffordable and turn them into Orwellian pods. You could do that at the state level. It's not going to happen at the federal level. Absolutely is not going to happen. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and before we do, I want to just read some of your comments here. Fidget Guy says, AI, the great equalizer for idiots. AI, we're all idiots now. That's what it stands for, right? Freetard says, never mind, all of Elon's brain-chipped monkeys died horrific deaths. Go ahead and chip me. The Patriot Girl says, so your car can become a nagging wife. I have a friend who, they've been married for many decades. They have a great family with great people. The only time they ever have an argument is when he's driving in the car. And so I said, yeah, you could say it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, a tale between two cities. But anyway, Patty Wax says, the gas may become an issue with old vehicles. New blend of 15% ethanol. That's right, it's what J.D. Vance is pushing. He went to Idaho to push that and to get the money of Big Ag and people who are there. But again, if you can grow alcohol for a particular type of fuel, there are some technologies out there that, again, we could start to look at. And I think that is going to be a choking point. So you're going to have to start to learn to do some of these things. If we're going to have a just-in-time delivery system and all of these bells and whistles and gadgets, that's going to be a position of slavery. We're going to have to take a couple of steps back and take some lessons from the Amish in terms of self-reliance. Yes, Lance?
Yeah, I was just going to say that is a good point from Patty Wax that, they aren't making new old cars. You still have to care about these legislation things as they're happening, because if this gets pushed out by a company, you can go around it and go with a company that doesn't do that. But as these things get more normalized, they're going to say, well, this accident happened because you didn't have this thing that would, stop your car when you glance to the side for a second. And that will become law for all future cars.
Well, when we had as they started rolling out these self-driving taxis, and I think it was it Uber that did it? It was in Phoenix, and you had that woman who got run over. She was jaywalking, and a lot of people said, well, look, you wouldn't be able to see that. She came right out of the dark and right in front of the car. And it had a camera that was facing forward and it recorded. It also had a camera that was facing back at the human driver who was supposed to take over control. It was the human driver who would not be able to see them coming out of the darkness. And then people said, well, wait a minute. These things, this particular self-driving model here does not use a vision system like the Tesla does or like a human does. It uses LiDAR. So it'd be able to see this person a long way off and react to that. They said, yeah, well, what happened is we turned off the emergency braking because it was just going off all the time. And so we turned it off. So again, they just stack these different technologies and the interdependence of them. They stack them up and they have real issues. I mean, that's what the real world looks like when you try to come out with these gee-whiz technologies. The Walrus says, Travis, I remember when they said the same exact thing about Trump. What's the context for that? Do you know?
What I was saying about Massie, and I did not put that in the best way possible. I said, if not him, then who? What I mean is he's the only one that is actually standing on principles. It was, they said that about Trump because he said good things and then did the opposite.
Yeah.
This is clearly a message of, if he gets voted out, it's because the Israel lobby gets what they want.
That's right. Well, it's a difference between what a candidate says and what somebody does when they're in office. And that's the difference between Massie and Trump. Trump has said a lot of things that he betrayed once he got into office. Massie has kept his positions there. He does exactly what you would expect him to do. He typically always takes the side of the Constitution, fiscal responsibility, and individual liberty. And that is reliable. You can take that to the bank. You can judge him by his actions, not by his party affiliation, which is the key thing.
Trying to say is, if you can't support Massie because of one thing that he did at one point, then what politician are you ever going to support? I can't. Right. There are very few politicians. I can't think of a single politician that has a record as good as Massie.
Yeah, no, I can't either. And that would include even Rand Paul, because I've had some issues with what Rand Paul did with COVID stuff. When we look at what is happening with gold quickly here before we run out of time, behind Turkey's gold sales, we look at what is happening with, and we said this as I was talking to Tony, we were talking about the fact that, gold is there as a backstop for when things get bad, and that's exactly what it did do. It did that for the Gulf states. It did it for Turkey. And when you look at what happened with Turkey, the reason behind gold's paradoxical, what appears to be a paradoxical move, the fact that it went down instead of up as you had all this Iran war that was started by Trump. It was the furious liquidation of gold by emerging markets, in this particular case, Turkey, scrambling to obtain reserve dry powder so that the capital could cover soaring costs of energy imports. So you've got the Gulf states who are looking at losing their income. How do we keep this thing going? Well, they cash in some gold. You look at Turkey, who is dependent on imports for their energy. They see the cost skyrocketing, so they start selling off gold. Turkey's foreign reserves had their biggest monthly decline on record in March. So Turkey's official reserves cratered by about $43 billion in March. Turkey has been hit hard by higher oil and gas prices caused by the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And again, when you look at this, the short-term issue that we're seeing here with Turkey and some other states cashing in massive amounts of gold, just understand from our perspective, Trump is cranking in the inflation. We got Trumpflation coming. and it is going to be hyper. This guy is always hyping stuff. He's going to be hyping the prices of everything. They're going to have massive price inflation. Goldman, by the way, is reiterating a $5,400 gold target as India curbs trigger bridal jewelry panic buying. So Indian government is now trying to stop the Indian people from buying gold because they need to support their currency. And they're very concerned about that. They have no internal source of gold. And so when people buy gold, it is money that is flowing out of India. Following the collapse of India's currency over the last couple of weeks, due in large part to the world's third largest oil importer being hit hard by the inflationary shock caused by Trump's energy disruptions in the Persian Gulf, Modi initially urged citizens to forego gold purchases and to not travel abroad. Don't do any unnecessary foreign travel because we need to support the currency. And again, so you got Turkey is one of the largest, and India is the third largest importer of oil. All of them are reacting to what is happening with this. But the real effect that's going to hit us in America is going to be the inflation of everything. And that's when gold is really going to take off. And that's one of the reasons why Goldman Sachs is not backing down off their future projections for gold. So again, you can go to davidknight.gold. Now is probably a good time because gold is on sale, especially if you look at the long-term trends. And that's the only thing that you can do. You can't time the market. And nobody knows what's going to happen in the short term. But in the long term, we can look at these trends and we know what the effect of this embargo is going to be. We have seen this movie before, and it's really bad. That's why I don't want to see the sequel. But Trump must have fallen asleep during the OPEC oil embargo, just like during that movie. He didn't seem to learn anything at all from it. When we look at the election, I said I wanted to get to this, and I want to do this before we stop. The gerrymandering that is happening. And this is a competition that is going on between the two, the duopoly of the Republicans and Democrats fighting each other over this. And as I said before, it is the way that they rig the elections, even before they get to this stage, as we see what they're doing with Thomas Massie, the massive, obscene amounts of money that are there. When you look at the amount of money that's being spent on elections, and of course, this is now a new record for Congress, and it is the amount of money that's being dumped in by the government of Israel and Israeli supporting billionaires to do this. When you look at that amount of money, when we look at the amount of money that's being spent on the presidential elections, I said, and I say it again, it is a metric of corruption. When George W. Bush ran against Al Gore in the 2000 election, Al Gore accused him of buying the election because he raised $100 million altogether. And that's not just what he got directly given to him as a candidate, but that's what the RNC got and all these other PACs that are out there. Al Gore got $70-something million. Now, it's not uncommon for us to have senatorial races or gubernatorial races where they get more than $170 million now. And we're seeing this amount of money just going up exponentially. We've got presidential races where the combined amount is over $1 billion now. That is a metric of the corruption in Washington. If they can print money and hand it out to people or hand it out to a foreign government like Israel, of course people are going to invest money into the politicians that will give them the money. And so it's a measure of corruption. But another measure of corruption is the partisan aspect of all this. And that's what we see happening with the gerrymandering stuff. Here in Tennessee, we just had the absolutists in the Republican Party, led by Marsha Blackburn, said, no, we can't have a single Democrat seat. And they now have the ability with computers to be able to pick the voters to such a degree that if they don't stop them with gerrymandering, they can go in and gerrymander out anybody. And it was a court case about this. And the court said, no, they can use gerrymandering on this. This, by the way, was a district. Hang on, let's go a little bit longer. This was a district that was set aside as a minority district. So it had a majority black district and Memphis. Now, Memphis has a large black population to start with. But again, if you're going to start creating congressional districts along racial lines, that's basically wrong. It's the same type of corruption that we see in jury trials. You know, it's been said the citizen's power comes out of 3 boxes: the jury box, the ballot box, and the cartridge box. Well, when you look at the jury box and the ballot box, these things have been rigged unbelievably by gerrymandering and by other things. And if they're going to create a district that favors a political party, if they're going to create a district that favors a particular race, or if they're going to create a district that favors a particular religion, for example. I could see this happening with Islam coming in and setting up a Muslim district or something like that. I think all of that is wrong. Just like when you allow these people to pick the jury, you have essentially picked the outcome. And they just ought to go with the first 12 people that walk through the door, in my opinion, a jury of your peers. So again, I think all of this is corruption. The guy that is getting kicked out, he is a Democrat who is 10-0 in his elections. He's been their congressman for 20 years, and now that he's being kicked out, he was in tears when he talked to Chris Cuomo because this is his life. His life is focused on his career as a congressman. But again, it just shows the power of gerrymandering. And I talked about that in North Carolina. In North Carolina, 2008, North Carolina voted for Barack Obama. There was voter remorse after that, it's big time in North Carolina. And so in the 2010 elections, Republicans won everything. They got the Republican, first time Republicans had a majority in the state house and the state representatives since Reconstruction. They won governor. They won everything except for congressional rates. Not a single seat changed for Congress, in spite of that massive sea change in the state. What does that tell you? Well, the congressional gerrymandering was what had fixed that. 2010 was a census year, and up until Trump began this gerrymandering process, now they've got a gerrymandering war. You know, they pushed it in Texas, and then California replied to do it for the Democrats. And so now that Trump has started this gerrymandering war, they're not waiting for the census to happen. But in 2010, they had a census, and that was when they were going to redraw the district lines. And it was redrawn by Republicans for the first time ever. And they did it in their favor. And so the next election, 2012, you wound up with a majority of Republicans in the congressional district, even though the massive sea change that happened in 2010 didn't change a single congressional seat. And so when you look at this, map of gerrymandering, it really has become something of a monster. And I would even say it looks a bit like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, what the Republicans and Democrats are doing. They really don't understand what they're messing with. Really. That's what the original gerrymandering map looked like. Yeah, they're creating a monster. Run away. And this is a monster that is destroying our elections, our system of government. When they pick the voters, you can forget about it being a real election. As I said many times, from ballot access to debate access, but it even starts before that. It starts with them picking the voters instead of the voters picking the politicians. And so when we look at whatever happens today with Thomas Massie, the whole election system, as I said, is really about manufacturing consent. You know, we think that it is about us choosing them. No, it's about them choosing the candidates, about them choosing which party is going to rule, and then using the elections to push their imprimatur of authority. Because they have no authority under the Constitution, that is what they turn to. So again, all this became, it's another bad idea from Trump. He decided, well, we're going to make gerrymandering in off years, in other words, not during census years. We're going to do that just strictly for political purposes. We're going to take the mask off. I mean, the reason that they did it every 10 years was because that's when they would do a census, and they would say, well, after we do a census, we're going to have to readjust these districts based on the number of people that we got and how the congressional seats are allocated between the different states. And so that's why they would revisit it every 10 years. Trump is doing it for purely political reasoning. And again, it's like everything else. It's like the weaponization stuff that he's involved in. When the Democrats do it, the Republicans complain about it. When the Republicans do it, when Trump does it, the Republicans cheer because they don't understand how it's going to be used against them. Go ahead and play us out, Lance. Trump's unique strategy and immediate backlash. California fired back. And so now what we have is a redistricting civil war that is happening. How is this going to shake out? Well, the Republicans have a slight advantage in terms of legislatures, state legislatures that they control. So it might, in the short term, work for them. But it is a corruption of the system, just like the jury selection is a corruption of the jury system. Thank you for joining us. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.